Okay, so welcome everybody to Entering the Creative Unknown. And I'm so thrilled today to have my friend Claire Coenen, who is a poet and a collagist. And she's also the founder and director of the Sophia Center for Healing Arts. So I'm going to go ahead and read her artist statement and then we'll get into it. So I'm going to read this in her voice. I write to connect with myself in this strange experience of being alive. I write so I can play with and get to know love, beauty, and truth. I want to get out of my way and allow creative energy to flow. I share my writing to pass on what is true and helpful to me with the hope that my work points towards love, beauty, and truth. I hope my poems provide the type of mirror and container that the poetry I love has offered me, particularly in times of pain. So, welcome to the conversation. And before we begin, I just want to say something really quickly as we were going through this. And already I'm having like, everybody has to excuse me because I have menopause brain at points. I don't know what the hell's going on, but I did say poet and collagist. And when I was thinking about those two art forms, they're kind of similar. So why don't you go ahead and hop in and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stacey, so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for just creating this platform. I think it's such a beautiful and meaningful way to connect with other creative women. And I'm just very happy to connect with you now here. Yeah, so um, I have always loved to write since I was a kid, and it's been sort of like on and off seasons when I've been really into writing, and then I've taken a pause and then been really into it. And as far as collaging, that is a fairly new practice for me. As a kid, I never considered myself to have any skill whatsoever as a visual artist. So I felt like I was kind of the kid in art class that was like, I feel like when I'm drawing with my right hand, I'm drawing with my left hand. It's like really hard to make an image in my mind or an image I actually saw like come onto a page. So a few years ago, I learned about this expressive arts practice that's called soul collage. And the whole idea of soul collage is to create collage cards that represent different parts of yourself. And I just fell in love with it like kind of immediately. So, I guess that was like in 2022, I really started collaging a lot and I was really getting back into writing poetry. And like you're saying, those practices feel so connected to me. It's like a poem is in many ways a collage of language, and you're in both practices playing with symbols and kind of the relationship of symbols, being intentional about the placement of things, and also allowing, for me at least, kind of a messiness and freedom, but also in a contained form, whether that's for me, I use these collage cards that are, I don't know the dimensions exactly, but these little rectangles, or a poem, which is bite size. Like I'm not writing epic poems. So I found that collaging and writing poems are very much sister practices that inform and feed off each other for me.
Okay, so I have a question, and this is like a question that because we're friends, I'm going to ask it and I won't feel like a big dummy. And I'm hoping that I'm answering somebody else's question as I ask this question. But what constitutes a poem? Because sometimes I read a poem and it's like, oh, you know, I think of a poem as like you just said, sort of like bite size, but then you have like Howl, I think is considered a poem. You have these poems where you're just like, this is a novel, this isn't a poem. So what constitutes a poem?
Gosh. Okay. Well, one, that is not a dumb question because I in many ways don't know a good answer to that question. But I'll take a stab at it. For me, I mean, a poem is is specifically a form of written expression that is very interested in the structure of the language, how the poetry is laid out on a page, how the form is intentionally written, and how the content, what the content of the poem is. Those things are meant to be echoing and reinforcing one another. So, if I'm just writing an essay or a story about a rose, that's going to just be, prose all over the page. But in a poem, I'm really playing with, okay, what is the way I want to put this collection of language on the page and arrange it in a similar way I'm thinking about a collage. And I think in some other kind of distinguishing characteristics of poems are there's usually, and it depends on the genre of poem, and there are always like exceptions to these rules, but there's usually some sort of rhythm or musicality to the language. And I think in a poem there is like often a distillation of meaning and symbolism that you're not finding in just an essay or a narrative. So, I say this and I do not have an MFA. I do not have formal training. So there might be someone listening who could give a much more academic answer, but that's in many ways how I conceptualize it. And really, again, emphasizing like it is so not a dumb question. I think a lot of people have that question, including me and poets, and like don't have a really clear answer.
It's interesting because as you were speaking, I was thinking about that, poems are when we're artists, or a lot of us that are artists, we many of us do either or. We're either doing something that's completely visual and we don't really deal with words that much because we don't have language, or we're I'm going to say it's all up here, even though it's not, or we're much more like word oriented and we don't feel like we're visual people. But when you're making this description of poetry, as you were saying it, I forget that poetry is something visual as well. You'll
Mhm.
read a lot of poems that have like a drop word or there is, and it's musical as well. So it is
Yeah.
really interesting that we kind of like, I think a lot of us, when we have art forms that feel either foreign to us or any art form of any kind that can feel a little bit pretentious, and I'm not saying that about poetry, I'm saying it about every kind of art form feels pretentious, doesn't it? Kind of.
Totally. Totally. I feel
so,
that.
so it is kind of nice to actually look at all of these different art forms as being the same, of being symbolic, of being rhythmic, of being visual, and of being lingual, even though it might not be in the form of words.
Yeah.
So, because I am a fully visual person, I'm a visual artist, even though I do some writing, everything comes to me in the form first of image. How
Mm.
do poems come to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say for me, similarly, there is some image that kind of um rises up. Um, that can also be connected to a particular experience or a moment in time or a feeling too. And there's not it's certainly not like formulaic at all, but sometimes there's like a word or an image or a phrase that will simmer up and I'll like put it in my notes app and then I'll be like, okay, I'm going to come back to that later. Um, and I also I wanted to sort of go back a little bit to that question connected to this of like what is a poem? I This morning I was actually talking to a friend who's also a poet about how I've sat with this question a long time for myself too of like what's the difference for me between a poem and a prayer and a blessing. Because for me, I think poetry is really a spiritual practice. And so I think a lot of times a poem I'm writing is in many ways me sort of trying to um, wrestle with or kind of need be in engagement with something that is mysterious or vast or challenging or also like deeply personal, like old wounds or current struggles. Like I think for me, it's the writing the poem is the way like my psyche is kind of um moving its hands through material that has an intensity to it or a real beauty or fascination. um so yeah, I think often there is a feeling or a memory or an image that's like you need to give more to this. So and that's the same process with collage, where it's kind of like something from the inner world is saying like, "Hey, I need you to listen to me," and then it's kind of I don't know that word needing, and I never like need. I don't really know why that's coming up, but there it feels it's like this inner um processing of what's rising is what I'm trying to bring into a poem that then becomes a container for the experience or the image or the memory.
Yeah, and how do you begin to know, and I'm going to actually put up one of your collages here right now, but how do you know when you are in relationship? Like, how do you know when the relationship is started? So oops, sorry about that. If you have it, this is how I've written poetry in the past. There's a word that I like how it feels in my mouth when I say it. And I like how it feels in my body when I say it. Like it has a certain rhythm to it. And I could build like that's the center of my mandala. And then and then I start kind of writing around that. Now, when I do that, because I'm not a poet, I'm not really quite sure if I'm being honest with myself in terms of whether I'm expressing something that's actually true or if I've entered into I kind of instantly go into the realm of pretentiousness that we were talking about with our poetry. That's where I go. So, can you talk a little bit about maybe using this collage that we're looking right now as a metaphor for the process of how a poem comes?
Okay, that's a good question. So, I actually made this collage during Bridget's Hearth. And it is made out of flowers I've taken photographs of. So, over the last 15 years ago, I've taken tons. I just love taking pictures of flowers, and I just have like tons and tons of images, a lot of nature images, but particularly flower images on my phone. And so I think that what I was drawn to doing in this particular collage was putting very unlike flowers together and arranging them next to each other so they're sort of in relationship to one another. And I think another quality of a poem that has an impact or has power is that it's holding like the tension of opposites. There is not too much. There's like a balance of salty and sweet or sorrow and joy, or there's not too much of one thing. There's kind of this tugging. So I would say I think putting this collage together, and this was one I just kind of threw together, and then I put this quote from John O'Donohue: "Imagination is the greatest friend of possibility." Um, I think it's like these were sort of random. There's not a rational, like, ooh, I need to have a magnolia because that symbolizes this, and I need to put it together with this. It really was this intuitive, like, I'm drawn to this, I'm drawn to this. I I want to have like there's this other sort of flower hanging down by the magnolia. It was kind of like I wanted to sort of balance the magnolia with a little bit more of that red, yellow color. But this is not something I'm like thinking about very linearly. Um, but I think for me, making this collage, this image of collage is similar to writing a poem in that there is this something that's beautiful to me or captivating to me. Um and I can't remember when I made this collage, like whether it was the magnolia that caught my eye first. Like obviously there's an origin. There's one thing that I started with, which I don't remember. And then there's kind of like a organic-ish process of putting kind of seeing what wants to companion the original inspiration. And the language, this John O'Donohue quote about imagination, I think is important in poetry for me as well, because for me, when I'm writing a poem, I'm not writing memoir. I'm not feeling like I have to say what's true in the sense of like factual. I'll change that language. I'm not having to say what's factual. I'm trying to get at something that is true and alive for me, but I'm letting my imagination play and I'm letting the images kind of relate to one another as as they want to. And I think a lot of some writers who have been helpful to me have talked about like really listening to the poem, really listening to what the poem wants to convey. And I think that's similar in collage.
So do poems, like this collage, do poems have centers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they do. I mean, I don't think structurally it's like in the middle of the poem, this is the center of them, but I think there is a core cohesive theme or image that orients or centers or sort of grounds a poem. Also, I realize I think on these images there's like a pink thing coming over, and I think that may have been when I was like screenshotting them. So the pink over
So,
them is not supposed to be there.
or maybe it is.
Or maybe it is. And that's I've actually like kind of captivated by the white rose having this pink on it. Interesting.
Very interesting. Okay, I'm going to continue on. Okay, so okay, I was really interested in I whenever I see the divine feminine, I'm always going to instantly go to it. But one thing that's really that I just want to talk about is that the purple flower images in this this entire morning I have been working with people that have brought up purple flowers in relationship to the divine feminine. So I just wanted to say that because it's happened a few times this morning. So can you talk a little bit about this?
Interesting.
Oops. You
Interesting.
just you just froze for a second. So
Oh
there you are.
no.
You're back. You're back.
Okay. Um, I made this collage a while ago, a few years ago, and the purple flower in this collage is a morning glory, and it's and the circle that the like rose stem is coming out of is there are three different morning glories on this collage. And I got like really captivated by a morning glory. And I actually have a poem on a morning glory in my book that came about because I had planted these seeds for morning glory, and I guess it was like I don't know, maybe September And I didn't think they were going to bloom until the next spring. And I'm like really a novice gardener, so I didn't have a lot of confidence they were even going to like bloom at all. And then like one November morning when everything else in my garden was dying, this one morning glory I like saw popping up. And it was one of those moments that just was so happy. Like it just felt like Mother Nature was showing off and this like real uh like and I use this language in the poem of like this kind of glamour of this flower that has just such a vibrancy. And so I think I got really interested in I mean interested isn't in the right word. Like I was really excited about morning glories and I use them a lot in my collage. And I haven't had any awareness that purple flowers are connected to the sacred feminine. But it was like this was the sacredness of nature feeling very alive to me. So I love knowing that about the purple flower connection.
I mean,
What
these were
were
just associations. So maybe it's,
yeah.
I don't know if it's true or not true, but there were a lot of associations around the divine feminine and also around the color purple being at the end of a spectrum,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
really interesting. Although you have both here. You have white and purple. The white one is also a morning glory, right?
Well, it's the center of the morning glory, just like super
Okay.
zoomed
Oh,
in.
wow. Yeah. I love this. Okay. I'm going to go on to the next one. Oh, okay. Talk about that.
Very
Oh,
different.
darn. Okay.
Yeah, so this is a collage I made maybe like 3 years ago that is called Deep Shame. And I found this image of this woman. I don't know if it's fossilized, like I'm not sure exactly what the right term is, but it's a skeleton of a woman, an ancient, it's very, very old, and I can't remember the book it came out of. But I knew that there was a slit neck. That's how the woman died. Like somehow I knew that was described in the image. And I was just really um moved and kind of heartbroken by the image. And I think for me, like a very old pattern of feelings of shame is something that's been a part of my life. And I wanted to create a soul collage card that sort of represented the part of myself that carried this very, very deep shame. Um, and this like mini collages like came together pretty quickly. It was just kind of like, this I mean, I really just get super messy on my floor and have all these images out and then just sort of like draw them. I mean, just kind of pick a bunch that feel connected to the emotion I'm wanting to convey. And it felt, yeah, it felt like um this needed some of my collages I cut and some of them I rip, and this is all ripped images. And there's this man in the background with sort of these glaring eyes. Um, and then these images, an image of a fish, kind of crab. And then this conch shell, this in my mind, sort of this broken spiral. And it's interesting because I spend time with language, but sometimes it's kind of like it's almost like hard to describe the collage in a way. It's it really to me that like even looking at it now, it still carries a pretty strong emotional charge.
It does. I can feel it in my own system. I feel a little bit
Yeah.
like I can't inhale as much. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, obviously this is a collective experience as women, and it's also so in front and center right now. So it's interesting thinking about that, like an image like this, and this is with all art images. They live and they transform as the world transforms. Our inner worlds transform, and our outer world is also transforming. So this is a really intense piece. And when it comes to, so I want to talk a little bit about when it comes to intensity around pieces like this and also around words. Like, how do you, so I would think with collage, I've only done a few collages, and it's very difficult for me to, I don't have a body connection to collaging, which
Mhm.
means that I will way overdo it. So I just am like, well, maybe I'll connect now if I put this here and I put this here and I just keep layering stuff, and then I'm just like, ah, shit. So tell me about, like, especially when you're working with something like this, how do you honor the image through the body?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely feeling it in my body as I'm collaging. And I think I am also knowing as you um pointed out, like it is a living image and it is going to change. Like my relationship is going to change over time. So I will say, like when I first did this a couple years ago, it carried a lot more charge than it does for me now. Um, but I think there's something to, in a soul collage practice, you buy these like soul collage cards that are this size. And so I think having this real um relatively small piece to put these images on does feel kind of containing to me, and there's like a safety to it that keeps it from being too overwhelming. Um, and and I also I have these other cards that are healing cards that are very nurturing, like the opposite of shame. I have a compassion card. Like I have these other cards that I know whether they're literally there in the moment, but I know they are with me. And I think part of what's been so helpful about this practice of soul collage is this is one part. And it is that, like, instead of um the shame feeling like this overwhelming, all-consuming who I am experience, creating the card is honoring it and disidentifying with it so then I can like relate to it. And then, I've done writing around it, then I can do sort of active imagination around it. And that and then offer it love, like offer like kind of offer it what I sense it needs.
Yeah, that's my also experience with it. I think for all of us, in the creative process of, and it's sort of nice just thinking about collage. Sometimes when you are like, I'm an artist, but I'm not a trained artist. I don't know how to draw everything that well. I just do what I'm doing, and we see what happens. But there's something about the idea of collaging, about using already, made images. There's something about it that can really allow for a little bit less, I would think, a little bit less of the inner critic in terms of how the image comes out
Hmm.
by your own hand. And
Yeah.
actually, it might leave a lot more feeling space instead of thinking space.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. And I also think the especially like the ripping element, the tactile, like kind of it feels, I mean, it almost feels kind of primitive in a way, like you're just getting in touch with the body and not, certainly a collage like this, I am not worried about, it's totally process oriented. It's not like I'm like trying to get this in an art show, you know?
Right.
And I also want to share, well, I'm thinking two things related to this. One is I'm thinking about your dolls and in the last episode, Katarina talking about her dolls, and how as I was listening to her talk about that, and I've heard you both talk about dolls and doll making, I think that in some ways I almost feel like my collages are like paper dolls, like they are these sort of expressions of my inner world that I can hold. And I have an altar, which very much for me symbolizes like what I need to hold in my heart in a certain moment. And if it's like I'm noticing this feeling coming up on me, I can put the collage card on the altar. And so there is sort of a practice of intentionality of like letting these cards, these collages be held and honored and tended to. Um, and then I also want to share. So, um, I know Ziam talked about women who run with the wolves and, that episode as well, but I was really moved by the whole concept of singing over the bones in that book. And after I read about that, the image of the bones in that, um, in this on the like these this skeleton, instead of looking at it and having this automatic association to these negative feelings, I then started thinking about the this being bones and bones as being indestructible, and the way Clarissa Pinkola Estes talks about bones. And so it is like, again, your point about the image meeting the moment in time. Like I do find that there can be something that's really meaningful and poignant when I come across something that helps me see a collage that carries pain, with sort of new eyes or with a new perspective.
Yeah, with a new knowingness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I this is one this is the one that's in your book, right?
No,
Is
this
it?
is brand new. I
Oh,
did
okay,
this.
because this looks bright like how I think about your book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The one in my book is was based off the original Divine Feminine one, but very similar color palette.
So do you want to talk about this Hand of Flowers and
Yeah.
Sky?
Yeah. So I have a friend who has a book that's going to come out in September, and she might be a good guest on your show actually, because it's all about making things by hand. Like it feels so Bridget's Hearth. It's a really beautiful book that I got to read the manuscript of a couple weeks ago. And she talks about her own journey with all of these practices of hand, crafts essentially, and a wide range of them, and also suggests different practices. But it got me thinking a lot about hands, and she suggests as one practice to trace your hand and then do some sort of art inside of it. Um, so yeah, as I've said, I have all these pictures I've taken of flowers, and then I have a lot of other pictures of sky and water. And I traced this hand, and I just wanted to fill it with beautiful things. And I'll also share that I was working on this um, the same week that's the anniversary of a friend's death. And the friend died many years ago, but it was a really, her death just had an incredible impact on my life and many other people's lives as well. But I wrote a lot of poetry after the time she died, and one of the things I wrote a lot about was really missing my friend's hands and this kind of wishing I could touch and hold her hands. And I went back and I'd just been thinking about this particular poem I had written on that, um, now like 17 years ago. And I went back and I read it, and it was an interesting convergence of things. Like I just read this friend's manuscript about working with your hands, and I was reading this old poem I had written about longing for someone's hands, and then I'm making this art of my hand, and it felt really like poignant to be able to fill my hand with what I see as very beautiful, and that kind of like heaven and earth, matter and spirit coming from the hand. I'm also, I'm really interested in um the chakras and the hands as the extension of the heart. So this, yeah, and this is again, it's very new, but it felt so alive for me. And I have the way I photographed it against black paper, but here's the actual just free. Here's the hand.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and as soon as I saw this on the screen, especially coming from the deep shame collage that we just
Mhm.
looked at, the first thought I had when I saw this hand was Phoenix.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is really beautiful. The hands have like, they do feel like an extension of the heart. And in some way, they're kind of the same shape as the heart.
Yeah.
There are definitely shared elements. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is really beautiful. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, so I love this one only because it's called The Poet and you are the poet. So I would love for you to speak on this.
Yeah. I made this collage um a few years ago, and I think that when I was really kind of allowing myself to um say I'm a poet, kind of owning like, oh, I write poetry, I'm a poet, which was a really hard thing to do, very like imposter syndrome getting in the way of that. I did feel connected to like kind of like the artist statement intention for my writing as like a the hope that this wiser creative force can kind of move through me, and I think a younger, like not pretentious, not trying to be anyone I'm not, but just like this kind of little girl in me, um who loves books and loves to dream. And this is I can't remember where this is from, but this is some image of Mary. So it's this sacred feminine who is offering um what to me is very beautiful and uh empowering. Like I've always just really had a connection to lions, and I've really, really loved Starry, Starry Night, and this jewel and the horse, and
This
um
is really wonderful because it's like a transmission, you
yeah.
know, from this divine feminine to you as a young soul.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
how it feels to me. And I also find it shoot, there was something that you just said that I found really interesting. Oh, when you were talking about the imposter syndrome. And the funny thing is that we live in a world where artists are either revered or they're completely disrespected,
Mm,
no
yeah.
matter how talented they are. So it's really interesting when you think about the idea of being uh, um, having that imposter syndrome feeling, which I have I think we all have that. I have that in everything that I do, even the things that I have like 10 million certifications in and have been doing for 20 years. I'm still
Yeah,
like,
totally
I say
relate.
this all the time that sometimes when I'm teaching a yoga class, like I'll literally be in the middle of something and like internally I'll think like, what am I doing? Why are these people listening to me? Like literally mid teaching, and my internal dialogue is just like, because sometimes just like it just shows up. Like, what
Yes,
right do I think I
totally
have
relate.
to be telling people to do this? So I think that's really interesting that you brought that up because it's sort of like when it comes to the arts, it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't, kind of.
Hmm.
So you might as well just do what you want.
Totally. I
um,
love that. I want to write
yeah.
that down. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So you might as well just do what you want. There's a
So,
poem there.
yeah, exactly. So there's, or something, or a song, or whatever.
Yeah, or a
Um,
doll, a movie,
yeah,
a film.
yeah, something. So now that we're on the poet, do you feel open to sharing a piece of poetry with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, I will share this is my book that came out in June of 2024, and I'm thinking about the well, they're kind of two poems I'm toying between, but let's start with a poem that speaks to kind of this kid inside who feels um critiqued and uh like disparaged by the educational system. Um so yeah, and this is a poem actually that is not that has elements of fact in it, but I let my imagination play with the details. It's called The Wise Woman's Words. On the porch, sticky gray September, I feel scrawny, like the green beans we'll have for dinner, broken, like the empty rocking chair beside me. I tell you how Miss Broomer, my eighth grade math teacher, said in front of the class, "You're slower than most with numbers. You shoot your eyes of fire to the horizon. Snap the bean. Fingers fierce. Inhale hot. It's barely audible, but I hear the exhale. That motherfucker." And for a moment, the clouds break. The heavens shine down on me. Numbers are nothing. Your words are everything.
Wow. I love that. And that's such a relatable experience for me as well. So I'm right with you, girl.
Yeah, math and I have never been buddies.
I also just love I love the part about the scrawny green bean. It's just such a that so this is so when we're talking about images and how this is symbolic language
Mhm.
and it's so textured. You
Yeah.
can feel the texture of that green bean. You know, sometimes you get a great one. Sometimes you get that one that's like, what happened? It's like 100 years old, even though it just got picked off the vine. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, really beautiful. And I'd like you to speak a little bit about, so when you construct, I know that we spoke about this before when we were looking at the images, but now we just heard a poem. So when you construct a poem, this poem, what's your originating thought?
Yeah. So, this poem arose from this broader project that really just sort of simmered up for me. This was like in 2022 during a time where I was very overwhelmed. And I started this series where I was writing poems from the perspective of a little girl and a perspective of a grandmother. And they were both on the same moment in time. So there's an equivalent poem, which I haven't looked at in ages, but there's an equivalent poem of the grandmother sort of telling her side of the story to what that the story of that poem is in. But I think at the time, so I was going through The Artist's Way, and one of the practices in that book is really to write about times in the past where you felt um, disparaged and shamed and, inadequate. And I was actually, this memory sort of came up for that, where actually, I can't remember exactly what I the language is in this poem, but it was the actual lived experience for me this poem is based on is not that the teacher said something in front of the whole class in an eighth grade math class, but I actually got a 40, like a 40 out of 100 on a math test once in eighth grade. And I was so embarrassed by it. Like I felt so dumb. It was kind of like, and I was such a like overachieving, have to be like good at everything student that just like hit me like a ton of bricks. And I felt so ashamed. But I felt like, and I don't really have particular memories around this is also like an example of like I'm pulling different threads and themes and memories together in one poem. But the overarching memory um I have had are times when um I have felt disparaged by someone, and a wise feminine person has offered sort of that fierce, like, I'm totally on your side. They suck. They're a motherfucker. Like that kind of response that I think, especially when I was younger, that sort of fierce, feminine, I'm on your side love was really important, and I wanted to write a poem about that. And I think this poem too, like I can be very I can get very like angsty trying to figure out the meaning of life, overly serious, and I was finding myself, and I think the artist's way was helping with this. Like I was really wanting to bring some playfulness in, and it felt very freeing to write a poem that, has this like bad word in it. Um, so that's a little bit of the backstory of that poem.
I think that there's something really important to what you said in terms of, to me, that shows the maturity as a poet, because I do feel like a lot of us, and maybe it's more so girls than boys, but I feel like we all go through this period of, being around eighth grade or maybe a little bit older than that, where we are writing poetry and it's very angsty.
Mm.
you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then when we're done with our angsty stage, we don't write poetry anymore
Hmm.
because there's nothing to write about if it's not angst. So there is, for me, I feel like in writing, in my own personal writing practice, I write a lot of stories in fairy tale form that are based on painful lived experience.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
write a lot that's based on not working through that kind of stuff. So that's kind of, I don't know what that's about, but I don't, I was just thinking about how, because of that, because I haven't moved beyond that arc of writing about painful experience, I don't have a fondness for my writing.
That makes total sense. And I will say in the like this fall, I was going back and writing about a lot of painful experience, and it's like uh uh, then I had to just be like I need a break. Like I think there is um a point where it's like, oh, I need to I need to balance. So I can relate
So
to that.
yeah, and speaking on that, I just want to still, we're just gonna chat, but I want to put up just a few more of your collages and we can talk as I display them. But how do you, how do you tend to your, both your collage and your poetry once it's out, once you're done engaging with it for the moment, at least?
Hmm.
Because for me, like and this is something that I'm trying to get better about, and that's part of why I'm picking your brain on it. But I have artwork like literally all around me, on the floor, w- just everywhere. And some of it is stuff that I just worked on, and some of it is stuff that I haven't worked on for months. And it's really because I work from the inner world. I do a lot of dream work and I do a lot of trauma work. It's really quite disrespectful to myself to just like treat this just like it's like shit all over my floor. Now, a lot of that is just my ADHD, but just as like artist to artist, how do you tend to your pieces when they're not actively being engaged with? Do you have a system or not?
That is such a good question. I'm so glad you asked that. I so I don't have like a set system other than I put all my soul collage cards, oh, sorry, that's my printer, in this basket. And I didn't always do that, but maybe a year ago I like found this basket and it was like this is where they're going to go. And that has felt good. But sometimes I'll I'll put cards out and I've been doing all this active imagination with these cards and I've been writing all these different like kind of giving the cards voices, and I recently printed this out which felt like kind of a way to respect the art, but now it's like super crinkly and like I've kind of been meaning to put it all in a notebook and tend to it, but um it's also like just other things come up that I do instead. Yeah.
It's so tricky to keep track of everything and to treat it with the reverence that it deserves. Um, and I think the idea of like having this container is, well, first of all, it's very important just to have a physical container, but that physical container creates the emotional container.
Yeah, yeah.
And speaking of containers, I want to make sure that we get this in. I want to talk about your new project of the Healing Arts Center. So
Yeah.
I'm going to take this off because I wanted to get to all of these, but I don't think we're going to be able to. However, people will be able to access them because I'm going to put them at the end of our video. So I'll stop sharing right now. And tell me about the Sophia Center for Healing Arts.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So this is a new space that I have opened. It's very much in its beginning phases, but essentially I've rented a room that is dedicated to a variety of creative practices where people can gather and be in community doing writing, soul collage. There are going to be book groups. I've like kind of an open studio, free, just come use the space. Um, and I've had this idea for a long time of wanting to have a dedicated space where there are a variety of practices offered, also including yoga too. And I will say, Stacey, your yoga classes, the online offerings I've attended have been really helpful to me in getting back into teaching yoga because I was on a long hiatus, and I think that the imagination and yoga overlap has fed me and has kind of nudged me to bring that into my teaching too. But I for me, the the body, mind, and heart, you know, we all have them and they need attention. And I think, in my experience, as a, working as a therapist for a couple of years, being in a lot of therapy, spending time in the past in inpatient spaces, has made me very aware of just how important creativity and togetherness is. And I wanted to start a space that wasn't clinical in nature, but really just for anyone who wants to um, tap into what I know to be this creative wisdom that we all have, whether we consider ourselves to be creative or not. So, I wanted to call it Sophia Center for the Healing Arts because, Sophia is this name and this archetype that's been very captivating to me, connected to the sacred feminine and meeting in Greek wisdom. And I'm I'm I think in the state of the world these days, I'm finding so much solace in just creating, and I really wanted to create a space that allows other people to create too. So that's a little snapshot of it. And I'm still kind of working on my elevator speech.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I want to just highlight the fact that it is, we're so fortunate to be in a community of women artists, but we're also, it seems like it's sort of like when we were talking about poetry and art being discussed, and there's always this like chance of like it being pretentious. And what I'm trying to say right now, there is a chance that it will be interpreted as spiritual bypassing, which it's absolutely
Mm,
not.
yeah,
But
that's
I just want to say that I think we are in this time in the world where the feminine is rising up to the surface like like an erupting volcano, and in order to meet this moment we are having to really truly understand and project what the divine feminine is. And what that is creation and
mm,
creating. And unfortunately, when we say things like, coming together and creating art is going to save the world. Now, if I read that in a meme, I'd be like, all right, girl, get your head on. You know what I mean? I'd be like, come on
totally.
now,
I know, I
get
know.
your shit together. But the reality is that this is the truth. And it's sort of like anything that is holistic. Holistic medicine takes time and intention to begin the healing process.
Yeah,
And the feminine medicine of creation and gathering and weaving is something that takes time. But once you start to see the web being built, you start to realize like, oh wait, I'm starting to see that something here is happening. And that's how I feel in this moment with you, and that's how I feel in the moments of these conversations. We're mirroring one another that this is actually happening, and you're doing it at your center, and Spinning Straw does it, and Lisa does it, and ZM does it, and everybody's doing it. And eventually the more we share, the more we share our creative practices, I'm much more able to look at somebody's dream with compassion than I am to hear somebody's violent words and think beyond the surface of what it is. Do you know what I mean? So I just
yeah.
really love that you are creating a space where people have the freedom to express and gather. It's so, so important. And I'm just so grateful to be in community with you and that you were able to join me today.
Yeah. Well, Stacey, I just want to emphasize how grateful I am for you. And Bridget's Hearth has been such a gift to me, and I'm so glad our paths crossed through Spinning Straw too. And there, I think Spinning Straws has been this window into like all these creative women, wise women, seeking women, and in a way that isn't like meme. It's not, it's there's such a real commitment to this practice, which is not glamorous and not, you know, just oh yay, fun, create like there's an intensity to it and a rigor to it, but a real like it's the most important thing in the world.
Agreed completely. Okay, so thank you so much. And I will be putting more of your artwork at the end of this, as well as how you can get in touch with Claire. I'll be giving a link to her book if you'd like to purchase her book. And if you want information on the Sophia Center, and even if you are not, she's in Tennessee, but even if you are not in Tennessee, I'm sure there's ways that you can reach out, support, connect, because it is a growing thing. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Stacey.